Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session on office fit-outs and Capex, what occupiers need to know. I'm Tuli Zulu, I'm Managing Director for INC Africa, and I'm also sitting here representing CORENET, Sub-Saharan Africa, which is a professional association focused on advancing corporate real estate. I'm moderating this discussion. As we all know, the way we design and invest office space is shifting. Occupiers are under pressure to balance budgets, employee expectations, and future-proof strategies, all while delivering value back to the business. That's exactly what we're going to unpack today. Our panel brings together voices from design, strategy, corporate real estate, and workplace experience, giving us a balanced view of office fit-outs and Capex. I'd like to introduce Bradley Rudolph, Head of Business Development at Angel Shack, Gosnati Manzana, Head of Group Real Estate Services at Standard Bank, Tango Matoti, Workplace Strategy Director at JLL, and Michelle Foster, Head of Workplace for South Africa at 91. Thank you all for being here. So we'll kick off with a question. I'll start with you, Bradley. In one sentence, what's the biggest shift you've seen in office fit-outs recently?
I think the subject that's on a lot of lips these days is neurodiversity and catering for users, different types of users, and seeing furniture as a strategic asset and not just as a sunk cost, and understanding what those users need in the workspace from a well-being point of view, just from an actual furniture point of view, right-sizing the products and choosing the right products for the workspace.
Nati, over to you.
I think certainly from an occupier perspective, it's really how employers have become quite aware and concerned about employee well-being. And so it's not really just about the corporate policies, but it's also around how the spaces are designed to support well-being and productivity.
Thank you. Tango?
Thanks. I think from a strategic point of view, there definitely needs to be that shift of seeing workspace as a strategic product that you actually offer as a tool to enable staff to be productive. It's no longer just a location. It is something that you can use as competitive advantage to be able to keep your own staff, have them coming into the office and enjoy the experience when they're actually there.
Thanks. Michelle?
I think what we also second is obviously the sense of well-being. That's quite a big angle that we feel that people are asking for. But I think another aspect that's quite important is a sense of community. We see that a lot within our space. What we recognize is that we spend 8 to 9 to 10 hours a day with these other humans within our space. So how do we create a sense of community, shared values, and culture within that space? And that is a big move for us.
Thank you. We can already get a sense that the landscape is changing with different things being more important. I'd like us to dig a bit deeper in some of those themes. We'll focus on 3 main themes, which is Capex and budgeting, workplace strategy and ROI, and employee experience. We'll start with Capex and budgeting with you, Nati. From a corporate occupier perspective, how do you balance Capex planning with unpredictable business cycles?
So, I mean, at the very start, for a multinational corporate like ourselves, and from a real estate perspective, we understand that we are always competing for share of allocation with possibly other initiatives that could touch on client. And so it is quite important when you think about your Capex plan to make sure that it's aligned to strategic objectives. The fact that it's something we're talking about tells you that sometimes you do get these, call it vanity type of projects that aren't really aligned that are not really aligned to strategic objectives. And so you want to prioritize projects with a high ROI. My context is having overseen a lot of fit-out projects across different countries, and that brings about some unique challenges. And the big message for me is it's always about the local context has to be relevant. And so you find less success with your budgeting and Capex allocations if your projects miss this local context. And so, in Standard Bank, the different countries are independent entities with their own boards and have an interest in ensuring as much local participation as possible to help the local economy, but also from a fit-out perspective, there are fundamental things like local material availability, ensuring that after the installation, these projects can be maintained. And so these are some of the things that you really have to pay attention to. The other point I want to make is partnerships with the right local service providers is very critical. Starting from professionals that you work with, I think it's a no-brainer that the contractor has to be local. You need that local understanding. Otherwise, your fit-out projects or Capex projects tend to be doomed from the start.
Thank you. And Bradley, from supply and design side, where can occupiers realistically save without compromising on value or quality?
I think just to add on to what Nati was saying, engaging with suppliers, I think it's key to engage upfront and not at the tail end of the design, because there's a lot of expertise that can come from a supplier. In terms of like multifunctional zones, where the old way of doing it is you would have deep focus areas or you would have collaboration areas in separate locations in the office. Pulling those together into multifunctional zones. So an example like a cafeteria with privacy pods, so and on the back of that you're then creating or you promoting creativity and innovation. So the guys are having brainstorming sessions over a cup of coffee. So multifunctional zones, and then over specifying. I think that's where the engagement from the start comes from. If you go down to sort of the practical sense, if you look at desking, a lot of guys use like a blanket approach, where you could, some users, and this again comes from engaging those users up front. You might not need 1600 by 800 desks. You could do 1400 by 700. So what you're doing then is you saving money and you're reducing space in the office. And that space can then be used more strategically later on for moves and changes and more strategic furniture.
Thank you. So it's not always just about budget. There are other things that are also important, like value. And that brings us to our second theme, which is strategy and ROI. I'm going to head over to you, Tango. Occupiers are asking tough questions about return on investment. From your experience, how are they justifying spend today? And what metrics resonate most?
So there's definitely that shift from cost cutting to a more experience-led kind of optimization of the workplace. And when we're looking at that shift, it's because real estate teams actually are now also expected to demonstrate, the workplace investments that they contribute to the business. So they need to delve a little bit deeper. And in that, it's critical to make the commute worth it for the staff coming in. And so when we're looking at it, it's no longer just a financial decision from a strategy point of view. It is both a talent and a culture and adaptability decision. You have to actually marry that as a strategic lever to half of the decisions that you're actually making. And so when we're looking at the return on investment, there's 3 different value propositions that I want to highlight. I think number 1, talent retention is a big thing because your high performers, there's a very discerning workforce currently. And if you aren't providing what they require from either a well-being point of view or being productive, they are actually simply going to leave the company. So you can't afford to not pay heed to that. And there's also quite a big, I think about 30% of the new workforce is Gen Z, and they're quite big drivers in actually making sure that office expectations are met, that wellness and technology integration are there, and that the spaces are actually purpose-driven. So to Bradley's point, where the furniture even being supplied needs to actually be functional and optimal for them to be able to come into the office. The second ROI is around productivity, because the spaces need to enable focus and collaboration. So you need to create spaces that work just as hard as your people do. And there's a lot of good AI measurement tools and systems out there that help with that utilization. So it all starts with be strategic in your decision of what are you trying to achieve with the optimization. Are you actually looking at how people are working and using that space? Because that utilization will help you to better plan the next space that you need to provide for your team, making sure that everybody is actually catered for from all the different myriad of requirements that there are there. Neurodiversity, inclusive design, the different generations you need to be catering for. If you've delved deep into that, it helps you to make better strategic decisions on right sizing of the building and how you then move forward with all the other elements that need to make up that space.
Sure. Anything to add on the community that Michelle touched on?
Absolutely. So people come to the office because they want to connect. We're social beings. And so we need to definitely make sure that in the decisions that are within that space that's being created, there's a balance of what I call me versus we spaces, spaces for each type of persona, but also being purposeful in the collaborative spaces, the social spaces, because that is what adds to the company culture and adds to that sense of community.
Thank you. Michelle, from an occupier side, what conversations are you having internally in terms of ROI?
I mean, I think for us mostly it's around talent retention. So creating a space that people want to come to, and like you say, it must be worth the drive there. Even though we don't necessarily work on a hybrid solution, for us it's really about being productive while you're in the office and to get multiple tasks done within the day. So something as simple as we allow take-a-lot orders to be delivered to the office because we want you to be able to come in and still get your deliveries.
What's your policy in terms of how many days people need to be in the office?
We don't have a set policy. So flexible, not flexible. It's a little bit of an autonomous kind of scenario that we've got. But we do kind of create those things so that you can do what sometimes would be the excuse to stay at home, you can do at the office as well. So we really kind of try and blend the two environments so that when you come to the office, it's more about the human experience. We're at home, we know that that's what people then choose if it's more focused angle.
So that actually brings us into the third theme, which is employee experience and culture. And I'll just stay with you, Michelle. You're deeply involved in employee workplace experience. What are the employees demanding in fit-outs right now? And how do you balance those needs with cost discipline?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because you want to give people what they want, but also in the end, people are there to work. It's a place of work. It's not a social hub, but you've got to find that careful balance between the two. And I think it's also about inclusiveness when we look at culture and well-being within a space. Not everybody wants to have a gym, not everybody wants to have a prayer room, but where's that line in between those spaces where people can cross paths where people can socialize. And quite often people use the word, oh, we want to go collaborate. Nobody says, hey, let's collaborate. It is a natural occurrence that happens because people cross paths. So the idea is really to create spaces where people can socially be together, which inevitably then leads to collaboration. But then in the same breath, we also look at what is important for people, for well-being, for culture, for social, but also having a shared interest as a company. So for us, our slogan is do the right thing. So we've got quite a heavy community-based organization, and it becomes almost your slogan. It's almost becomes something that you hold on to because it's part of your identity as 91 or as a company.
And Tango, are you seeing similar trends globally?
Yes, absolutely. We're seeing similar trends, and I think the critical thing that we're also seeing is the pin finally dropping in understanding that stakeholder engagement is critical to be able to keep people happy and to give them what they require to help you at the end with your own bottom line. So yes, well-being is a bigger requirement. Inclusive design is a bigger requirement. Sustainability and making sure that the company people work for aligns with their own personal values is also something that we're seeing globally. So it does help with making sure that there's that alignment, and the brand equity speaks to people as well as adds to the whole work experience and the journey of people being able to be proud of where they work.
Thanks.
I wouldn't mind weighing in on that discussion, because I think a lot of big corporates like ourselves have a lot of internal data points around what their employees need. And without having a go at designers, often some of them show up in a way that's, a lot of the solutions are based on research and lack the context that I was talking about earlier around the culture of the corporate, which your internal teams are always going to understand better than anybody coming from outside. And also the country context. We were talking about earlier around, kind of how you approach these spaces, and the world of work has changed. The Standard Bank experience has been, shortly after COVID, most of our countries returned to work full-time, with the exception of South Africa, which is South Africa and Mauritius, and of course our smaller offices, London, New York, where we're still working hybrid. And that has an impact on how you think about these spaces. And so if you were in the context of a country where everybody's back in the office 100% of the time, and you come with the idea of, which we often see, designers, for instance, from SA doing work outside, they come with a context of, I'm designing these spaces for hybrid work, when actually only elements of it might be relevant in the local context.
Thank you. And we're under time pressures now. So we've spoken about ROI, employee experience, and budgets. And before we wrap up, I'd just like to bring it all together with a last question from each of you. Bradley, what's the one thing occupiers must keep in mind when planning their next office fit out?
I think, look, mine's pretty short and sweet. I think just, designing with purpose, I think, which kind of mirrors what everyone on stage is saying. Smarter allocation on products and not necessarily cost cutting. So I think that's just the key point that I would want to put out.
Local.
And local, definitely local.
Thanks, Nati.
Context is important. When you plan these Capex projects, especially if you operate across different geographies, you've got to take that into account. What we find is that there are definite countries where you have to do a lot of front-end loading the project from a planning perspective, and that you're not appointing different service providers once you've started, because the processes tend to be long and complex, and most importantly, post the stakeholder consultations, just make sure you get the sign-offs. Changes while you're running are generally not a good idea.
Thank you. Tango?
I think my parting shot is that the best cases we've seen that work are the ones that actually combine data-driven planning, the ones that are going to be employee-centric in their decision-making, and flexible and sustainable in their solutions. Those are the ones that will keep the longevity of your buildings and your workspace in the end.
Thanks. Michelle?
I mean, I think I echo that. I think a lot of it is about your building working smart and hard. It is about when you create your brief for what that office should look like. It should be data-driven, but it should also be employee engagement. Ask people, don't assume that the latest trend is X, Y, and Z, and then we do that, or kind of compartmentalize our offices. Here you collaborate, here you socialize, here you do this. It really is creating an environment where many of those things can be done in the same spaces. So that kind of makes your office space work much harder than these spaces that sit empty when not in use.
Thank you. So we've heard that successful fit-outs aren't just about Capex numbers. They're about making smart trade-offs between ROI, creating spaces that genuinely work for people. Thank you, everyone, for joining the panel, and thanks for your time. Enjoy the rest of the session.